Sophie Cunningham back in Indiana. Yesterday, we got news Lexi Hull was returning. We already knew Cece was going to be there. The question was...
Natasha Howard looked good on paper. Efficient scoring, veteran leadership, championship pedigree. But the surface-level numbers told a misleading story. Around 11 points per game on better than 55% shooting sounds impressive. Yet the real game film painted a different picture. Production doesn't automatically equal influence, and influence doesn't guarantee the right fit. That disconnect became the core problem. The stats suggested reliability, but the on-court reality lacked urgency, flow, and meaningful impact within the system. What appeared efficient in the box score often stalled momentum, slowed execution, and failed to elevate the team when it mattered most. In the end, it wasn't about raw efficiency. It was about presence, pace, and compatibility, and that's where things simply didn't align. While Caitlin Clark was pushing the tempo, generating clean looks, pulling defenders into double teams, and essentially defining the entire offensive identity, the commitment around her wasn't universal. She was accelerating the game, demanding movement, and forcing defenses to react, yet parts of the lineup operated at a different rhythm. The result was a clear disconnect. One player driving urgency and creativity, while others hesitated to fully embrace that high-speed system. When the engine is running at full throttle but the pieces around it aren't aligned, the offense loses sharpness. Clark was doing everything to lift the ceiling, but without complete buy-in, the flow stalled and the system never reached its full potential. There were stretches that sparked real concern, possessions with ball never returned to Clark, sequences that unraveled not because the defense forced it, but because of questionable decisions. Fans noticed immediately, and the frustration built game after game. The tension wasn't subtle. It was visible in the flow, in the stalled possessions, in the missed opportunities. Social media began calling it out. Analysts started circling the issue, and the conversation gained momentum. Then the situation took a sharp turn. Instead of confronting the basketball reality, chemistry, fit, and system execution, a different storyline began to dominate. The focus drifted away from performance and towards something far more divisive, filled with accusations, friction, and growing noise. At the center of that shift was the indirect spotlight placed on Clark's massive fan base, amplifying divide and muddying what should have been a straightforward basketball discussion. Now, pause here, because this part truly matters. Before Caitlin Clark arrived in Indiana, the Fever weren't driving headlines, packing arenas, or controlling national conversation. Then she stepped in and the entire spotlight shifted. Attendance surged, television numbers jumped, and suddenly the Fever were being discussed across the broader sports landscape, not just within women's basketball. That wasn't hype. It was measurable impact. So when a narrative emerged casting portions of that energized fan base in a negative light, it didn't just spark debate. It deepened fractures both outside and inside the organization. The conversation drifted away from momentum and toward conflict, and the atmosphere tightened. While the external noise kept growing, another tension was forming behind the scenes, an unmistakable clash between individual ego and the demands of the system. And that's where the foundation really began to crack. The team was clearly shifting toward Caitlin Clark's identity. Fast tempo, high IQ reads, constant ball movement, spacing, trust, but not everyone adjusted to that direction. There were comments about chasing MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year honors, and individual milestones, all while stepping into a roster already built around a defined cornerstone. That mindset clashes with how winning cultures are built. When you join a team anchored by a generational talent like Clark, the objective is straightforward. Complement her, protect her, and amplify the system, not compete with it. That disconnect became impossible to ignore, especially as Clark kept delivering. Night after night, she created advantages, broke defensive schemes, absorbed heavy contact, and still produced at a high level. She's been one of the most physically challenged players in the league, facing aggressive coverage, hard fouls, and constant pressure that pushes beyond standard competitiveness. The question kept surfacing. Where was the edge? Where was the response? Where were the teammates making it clear that the franchise centerpiece is off limits? For a stretch, that presence simply wasn't there. Now the tone is shifting. Moving on from Natasha Howard wasn't just a roster tweak. It was a statement that the culture is changing, that the focus is no longer juggling personalities or narratives, but building the right environment around Clark. The fan reaction reflected that immediately. Relief, clarity, and a sense that the team is finally aligning with what's been obvious for months. This isn't about dismissing talent. Howard is proven. But not every skill player fits every system, and a system shouldn't bend away from a generational foundation. The Fever made their decision, and the next phase sends an even louder signal to the rest of the league. This isn't just removing a mismatch, it's reinforcing protection and commitment around their franchise leader. They're building what fans are already calling an enforcer mentality, adding toughness, physicality, and players willing to step in and make it clear that Caitlin Clark won't be pushed around. For too long, the league allowed the narrative to drift. Hard hits, aggressive targeting, and minimal accountability, and that phase may be ending. If the Indiana Fever fully commit to this identity, surrounding Clark with skilled but also loyal, defensive-minded competitors, this stops being just a playoff push and becomes a serious problem for the rest of the WNBA. It's no longer only about slowing Clark. Now opponents must handle a system built around her strengths and a roster ready to stand with her. That combination is dangerous, and it's only the beginning. The next additions, the roles they define, and how this identity solidifies could reshape the league's balance of power. This isn't just roster construction. It's a structure designed to protect, empower, and unleash Clark at full force. Once a misfit piece is removed, the real question becomes who fills that space, and the Fever are signaling a clear priority: toughness, loyalty, and presence over empty stat lines. Every player stepping onto that floor must align with the mission, ride with Clark or step aside. One name that perfectly captures that shift is Sophie Cunningham. She isn't just a scorer or a role player. She brings edge, urgency, and the kind of fire superstars need beside them. That's what Clark has been missing. Talent was never the issue in Indiana. You already have elite creation from Clark, interior strength from Aaliyah Boston, and perimeter scoring from Kelsey Mitchell. But what lacked was presence, the type that makes opponents think twice before crossing the line, the kind that shifts the tone of the game without even touching the ball. That's where the enforcer concept takes hold, because the Indiana Fever are no longer comfortable watching Caitlin Clark absorb constant physical pressure without a response. They're finished with opponents testing limits and turning every possession into a grind. And once the tone shifts, the psychology of the game changes. Basketball isn't only about skill. It's about hesitation. And if teams start believing every hard bump will be answered, every aggressive sequence matched, every moment checked, that hesitation creeps in. Against a player like Clark, even a split-second pause is decisive. There's another layer, though, and it matters just as much. The organization had to weigh long-term commitment concerns around Sophie Cunningham, especially coming off a significant knee injury. So this isn't only about toughness. It's about rebuilding trust inside the locker room. Small disconnects in style, attitude, or external narratives spread quickly, affecting communication, chemistry, and execution. And earlier stretches showed hints of that. Offense stalling, energy dipping, and Clark carrying more than just scoring responsibility. That's not sustainable for any player. So the Fever reset, removed the noise, and began shaping a roster that mirrors Clark's tempo: fast, unselfish, aggressive, and unified. If it clicks, this moves beyond a playoff push into contender territory, and the ripple effects reach the entire WNBA. Physical teams like the Chicago Sky, who previously leaned into testing Clark, now face a different dynamic. Targeting her no longer comes without consequences. That changes matchups, preparation, and coaching strategies because opponents must prepare for Clark and a system built to amplify and defend her. The biggest factor is that Clark is still early in her career, still evolving, already driving attention, and reshaping the conversation around the league. So place that version of her inside the right structure with full backing, and the ceiling rises dramatically. This signals a power shift. Instead of relying on hierarchy and established names, a new era is forming around a transformative centerpiece, and Indiana is committing without hesitation. Debate and criticism will follow, but results will decide everything. If this version of the Fever starts winning, playing with edge and unity, this moment will be remembered as the turning point. The question isn't whether the move was bold. It's whether the rest of the league is ready. Because if the chemistry locks in and Clark reaches another level, this isn't just improvement. It's the emergence of a new powerhouse. And once that momentum starts rolling, it's incredibly difficult to stop.